All right, Krystal, what's on your radar?
Well, as you know, over the weekend, President Trump officially nominated uber-conservative Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court. Her confirmation, which certainly appears to be a near certainty, would create a 6-3 conservative majority on the court, with potentially massive implications for everything from health care to labor rights to corporate power and more. Liberals are understandably beside themselves at the specter of feminist icon RBG being replaced with her ideological polar opposite. And those liberals have decided that they know exactly where to put the blame. Is it on the feckless Dems, who have already signaled their decision to preemptively surrender in the nomination fight? After all, according to Axios, they're nervous about being too tough on Lady Judge Amy Coney Barrett for fear of upsetting all the suburban housewives of America. Because obviously, civility towards one elite is way more important than the fate of health care for millions. Amazing how easy it is to defeat liberal identity politics with a little conservative identity politics. Here's a little taste of how our tough resistance hero Democrats are gearing up for battle.
But I read a piece by Adam Gentleson, who was a top staffer for Harry Reid, earlier this week. He suggested Democrats could gum up works in the Senate. They could systematically deny unanimous consent to meet. They could have a series of quorum calls. That's not good enough?
I know Adam. I like Adam and respect him, but he's wrong. We could slow it down, perhaps a matter of hours, maybe days at the most. But we can't stop the outcome. What we should do is to address this now respectfully.
I think Democrats are going to continue to appeal to the sense of honor that when someone gives their word, as Lindsey Graham did, that they can't just break it.
So I appeal to those few Senate Republicans, the handful who really will decide what happens. Please follow your conscience. Don't vote to confirm anyone nominated under the circumstances President Trump and Senator McConnell have created. Don't go there.
So that's all pretty pathetic, huh? But no, they're not the ones coming in over the weekend for elite liberal castigation. Could go a little further back. Perhaps they place the blame for this dire turn of events on the disastrous Hillary Clinton campaign, the arrogance, the lack of a campaign in the Midwest, the decision to try to frame the race as a referendum on Trump's morality. But nope, not them either. Or maybe they went after the party apparatus that rigged that 2016 primary to Hillary's benefit, clearing the path for an insanely unpopular and uninspiring candidate. Nope. And you already know that they will never, ever engage in self-reflection or critique of the fallout from 40 years of neoliberalism. No. Of course not. Because the real villain, according to the liberal galaxy brain responsible for all that ails us today, is always and forever the voters. Here's Vox's Aaron Rupar. Amy Coney Barrett is anti-abortion, anti-gun control, anti-health care, and even seems to oppose same-sex marriage. She could sit on SCOTUS for 40 years. Hope those Jill Stein protest votes were worth it. Wow, super clever, bro. And because all great liberal minds apparently think alike, or more accurately, because they relentlessly regurgitate these same exhausted talking points over and over, here's what Bill Maher had to say.
The Supreme Court hears oral arguments to overturn Obamacare on November 10th. Once this new justice is seated, Obamacare is likely gone. And after that, Roe versus Wade. So I hope you enjoy carrying your rape baby to term. You can name it Jill Stein.
Nice. First of all, let me just say that just as a purely strategic choice, nothing could possibly be less effective at winning people over than your constant shaming and cajoling. If you have ever wondered why Donald Trump's base seems so solidly unshakable, you might query whether this kind of sneering liberal contempt and condescension has anything to do with it. But the truth is, people like Aaron and Bill and all the rest, they don't actually care about winning people over or really any end result here. They just want to tell the same joke over and over again to raucous applause because excuses and voter shaming apparently never ever get old. Second, for what it's worth, Aaron Rupar's own outlet, Vox, found in their post-2016 election analysis that Jill Stein voters did not actually cost HRC the election because they weren't all going to vote for Hillary Clinton. Hillary was not entitled to those votes, and she was not entitled to the Gary Johnson votes either, and the voters who selected one of those options were not even close to uniformly Hillary voters in waiting. Even if you allocate to Hillary all of the Stein and Gary Johnson voters who had Hillary as their second choice, she still would have lost Florida and lost Wisconsin, giving the Electoral College victory to Trump. But finally, there is nothing I find more frustrating and counterproductive than voter shaming. Listen, I actually did vote for Hillary Clinton last time around, so I have as much right as anyone to run around on my high horse, chastising third-party or non-voters about how terrible Donald Trump has been. But guess what? I don't buy into this nonsense that our fellow citizens are the enemy or the source of all of our problems, nor do I feel so amazing about the vote I cast that I want to run around crowing about it. Just think about this. Only roughly 60% of the eligible voting population actually voted in 2016. So if you add the 40% who didn't vote with the percentage that voted for Trump or voted third party, you're talking about somewhere around 70% of the population. What kind of a liberal philosophy leads you to a place of complete judgment and scorn for 70% of the population? I don't mean to dwell on this, but I actually think it's really important because Democrats can see very clearly the ugly results on the right from their realization that they need to crush the will of a majority of the people, rig the rules, and maintain their own minority elite power at any cost. But liberals are utterly blind to their own deeply ingrained anti-populist philosophy. Rather than the traditional liberal approach of seeking to understand a societal phenomenon, today's liberals prefer passing a sort of Old Testament judgment. These are the good ones, these are the evil ones, and some hellish consortium of Rachel Maddow, the New York Times editorial board, and the Never Trump ghouls of the Lincoln Project, they're the ones who've been granted the power to decide who's good and who's bad. Rather than persuade those who might disagree or understand or, God forbid, engage in any self-reflection, the goal is instead to excise the evil ones, push them out of polite society, leave them in some red hinterland to rot. Jill Stein voters, of course, have been marked down for all eternity as on the evil side of the equation. And it's all very convenient because if everything is bad that's bad is the fault of the people, then elites can never, ever fail. As Owen Higgins replied to Aaron Rupar's dumb tweet, quote, "Have you ever breathed a word, even mildly criticizing the Clinton campaign for blowing one of the easiest layups in U.S. electoral history? Or is this just going to be the Democrats cannot fail, only be failed for eternity?" Much of the liberal commentariat exists at this point just to protect elite Democrats from criticism and to construct ever more strained rationales for why none of our nation's many problems could ever possibly be their fault. And if this great brain trust loses to Donald Trump once again, you can bet that they will tell you once again the problem is you. And Sauger, after I wrote this, you know who actually said something pretty decent on this about voter shaming? Kamala Harris.
Wow.
Came out and was like, it's insulting to say that you're entitled to these votes because you're not. That's the whole point of a campaign, is to win voters over. And if you fail to do that, that's not on them, it's on you.
It always is on you. And I don't understand how these people can behave this way. Again, it just goes back to, what we were talking about last week, where they put cultural guns to your head and you have to do this.
Yeah.
And enough people are like, no, I don't. Screw you. That is probably the central animating thesis of why a lot of people voted for Trump.
Totally.
I saw a sign which was like, Trump, F your feelings. And everyone's like, oh, that's so gross. I'm like, honestly, probably the best case I've ever seen for Trump. That's it right there, right? And that's the thing that these people will just never understand, which is, look, elites have stripped away from most Americans their ability to organize, their ability to have power in culture, their ability to have power in their workplace. The last thing they even have is a vote. So, you're not going to take that away from them. It's one intrinsic thing that you at least have in your life. And you can't shame them into voting the way that you want. It has never, ever worked. It literally hasn't. Even now, whenever it comes to Trump, Russiagate had nothing to do with this. I don't even think the Supreme Court shaming will. It would be because of coronavirus, because of a failed economic coronavirus response on both fronts, the pandemic and the economy. That's as in people are voting because they're like, hey, you know what? He did something which materially affected my life in a negative way. And that's why I'm going to vote against it. And then once again, that goes to the stakes of their own lives. They refuse to play within those realms because they're just as complicit in destroying those people's lives as well.
Jill Stein voters have become the easy mark because they've been caricatured as this privileged group, that they were just mad that their feelings were hurt that they didn't get their candidate, which does not reflect whatsoever who this group actually was, where their allegiances lied, but never you mind about that. The facts and the details never got in the way of the good story there. They never want to talk about the non-voters, though, because we know from the research, non-voters are disproportionately poor or working class. They're disproportionately people who are not privileged, who are just completely disaffected from the system. And so to go after them is a much harder thing, so they just leave them out of the equation altogether. But when you put together non-voters, plus everybody voted for Trump, plus everybody voted for third parties, you're literally talking about 70% of the population that they're telling you is bad and evil and beyond redemption.
Yeah.
That's an absurd place to stand, and it's a disgusting place to stand, and it's a place that will actually destroy the country ultimately. We're going to cover a poll later in the show. This is from New York Times Siena that says 40% of Americans don't believe that the electoral system, that like our political system at this point, can address their problems. That is just too broken.
It's crazy.
So what are you going to say to them? But they never, ever do any sort of self-reflection or think about, okay, what happened to lead us to this place where 70% of the population would be offered the choice of Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden and be like, no thanks, I'm either going to stay home or go in another direction.
Yeah, no, I mean, they'll never think about those people. And there's so many tens of millions, also many young, not just working class people.
Absolutely.
Most of them are young. A lot of these people don't even believe in the political system. So maybe speak to their concerns, actually do something about it. But shaming them on, highly paid people on cable and all that, it's a lot easier.
Yeah, and of course, as a strategy, it's terrible too. You will not win over one person that way.
Yeah.
Coming up on Rising, academic and best-selling author Ibram X. Kendi is facing backlash over tweets about Amy Coney Barrett's adopted children. Zed Jelani is going to weigh in when Rising returns.